Hello everyone, welcome to the Math Club Talk. Today's speaker is Ritvik Radhakrishna. He's a BMA third year student. His interest lies in probability theory, differential geometry, and Lie groups. Today's topic is finite Fourier analysis. Uh, yeah, over to you, Ritvik.
Okay, thanks.
So
Yeah,
first of all,
so
do you want questions to be written in the chat or?
yeah, you can either unmute yourself and ask. I don't have the chat open, so someone should read it out. Then you can read it out, maybe.
All right, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so today I'll talk about finite Fourier analysis. So I don't know how much time what I have planned will take. So I'll first describe characters and the main theorem about orthogonality relations and that they form a basis, and then I'll give you the application, which is actually the thing which is more non-standard and somewhat more interesting. And then after that, if I have time, I'll prove this in also hopefully in a way that is not as standard. Okay, because these orthogonality relations, you might, it actually just follows from the previous lecture that happened in the math club, the orthogonality relations for characters for general irreducible representations. But anyway, I won't assume that you know those things. Okay, so let me start. So aim is that if you have a finite group, let's say for us it's a finite abelian group. So you have a finite abelian group, and let V be the space of all functions on G, complex valued functions on G. On G, okay? And by space, I mean vector space. Actually, later we'll also put an inner product. So it's an inner product space. So you can add functions, multiply functions, and we'll define a dot product also. So the question is, can we find a natural basis, orthogonal basis? Okay. So let me just get into the answer straight away. So characters. So this will help us answer this question, or question. So what is a character? So a character on G. So G is a finite abelian group for me. Is a homomorphism phi from G to the circle. So you can imagine the circle as all complex numbers with length 1. Okay, and you can multiply them, so it forms a abelian group. So which satisfies. Yeah, so what does homomorphism mean? It means this. So I'm just saying that, writing that. So this is, I mean, part of the word homomorphism itself. So for all A, B belongs. So these are special complex valued functions, and I have not told you whether there are finitely many or what about this, but these are some special complex valued functions, and they will actually form a orthogonal basis. So my first point I forgot to say is that this space of functions is basically to each element of the group you're assigning a complex value, right? So it's a finite dimensional space. It's just isomorphic to R to the power number of elements, C to the power number of elements of G, right? Okay. So if there are any first years here, I'm not exactly sure what all you know about vector spaces. So if you have any questions, just ask and I'll go through it again. Okay. So this is the definition of a character. And so I'll not go through all the standard examples right now because I don't know how much time I'll have to do the actual, non-standard application. So inner product on V. So let me just define the inner product on V. So this inner product on V is just coming from the inner product if you identify V with R to the power C to the power mod G, the Hermitian inner product there. So let me just define this. Suppose phi and psi are functions from V to C, G to C, are functions in V. So that is what phi and psi belongs to the space of all functions. Right. Then phi compose psi is defined to be 1 over number of elements of G, summation G belongs to C of phi of G times psi of G bar. Okay. So if you imagine a function on G as a tuple of complex numbers of length number of elements of G, then without this averaging 1 over mod G, that's just the Hermitian inner product. And we just add this 1 over mod G for convenience. It's not too important. So, okay. Okay. So now what's the main theorem? So under this inner product, the set of characters, all characters, that is homomorphisms from the group to S1. Homomorphism means it satisfies chi of A times chi of B equals chi of AB. So in particular, chi of 1 is equal to 1, for example. So the set of all characters form an orthonormal basis of V. Okay. Yeah, so this is the main theorem we'll use. Okay, and I'll come back to examples and the proof later if there is time, but let me just go into an application. So linear functions. So now I'll move to actually the group being 0, 1 to the n, which I'm identifying, which I'm basically Z2 to the n or F2 to the n. So you do component wise addition modulo 2. So that's my group. Okay, so F is a function from 0, 1 to the n to 0, 1. So let's start with such a function. Okay, so this is Z2 to the n, and this is Z2 or F2 or whatever. Okay. So here on the right hand side, you're adding modulo, you will do addition modulo 2, and on the left hand side, you will do component wise addition modulo 2. Okay, and now the definition of linear function naturally is F is linear. F is linear if f of x plus y, left hand side, this x plus y, you're doing component wise addition modulo 2 is equal to f of x plus f of y for all xy belongs to this group, this finite group of 2 to the n elements. Okay, so here G is 0, 1 to the power n, and it's said to be linear if it satisfies this. Okay. So now what are the linear functions in 0, 1 to the n to 0, 1? Okay, that's very easy to answer. So every linear function is basically dot product with some vector in Z2 to the n also. It's given by that. So this is a simple claim is of the form what? So if x is equal to x1 to xn, basically these are 0, 1 entries. So this belongs to Z2 to the n. That maps to, so it's of the form that maps to summation I equals 1 to n alpha I xi, where, okay, so this is, I'm writing, this is basically alpha dot x, where alpha is equal to alpha 1, alpha n, and this is an element of 0, 1 to the n. So I'm saying there are only 2 to the n linear functions and distinct linear functions, and each of them is given by dot product with some fixed vector in 0, 1 to the n. Okay. And the proof is very easy. So firstly, I want to say that any such function is a linear function because alpha dot x plus y is equal to alpha dot x plus alpha dot y. And why are these the only linear functions? Well, you just define, let alpha I equal to f of ei, where ei is the basis vector, and then extend by linearity, right? So where ei is 0, 1 in the ith coordinate and zeros elsewhere. So this is 1 in the ith coordinate and zeros elsewhere. And then just apply definition of linearity. Okay, so define alpha equals to f of ei, and if you have some other linear combination of the ei, some general element of z2 to the n, then you can just expand it out and you will exactly get summation alpha I times the ith component of the vector, the ith coefficient. Okay, so that's clear. So now the interesting thing is you may not have exactly linear functions. So let me talk about approximately linear functions. So definition. So what is the definition? Basically, that linearity condition holds for most inputs x comma y. That is f of x plus y equal to f of x plus f of y for most inputs x comma y in 0, 1 to the n. So f is epsilon approximately linear. So I'm moving to my application here, just setting up things so we can state what we want to do. Linear if probability x comma y. So I'm choosing x comma, I'm just writing it like this. You can just say the condition holds for epsilon fraction of the inputs, but I'll write it like this since it's convenient later. Is greater than equal to 1 minus epsilon. Okay, so x comma y are chosen uniformly at random independently from 0, 1 to the n. And I'm saying that this condition holds for with probability at least 1 minus epsilon. Okay, so that's what's called epsilon approximately linear. Now you can ask, what are epsilon approximately linear functions? Are they actually given by almost given by alpha dot x for most inputs? So that's the main question we'll come to. So let me just define. So can we make a good classification of this by representing this function well by a single dot product vector alpha? So let me just make that clear. So f is said to be delta close. So just try to see what the exact difference between these two definitions is, and then you'll understand the main point of what the question is. So linear, if there is a linear function g, so we know what all the linear functions are from the previous page. They're just given by dot product with some fixed vector in 0, 1 to the n, such that, so is there a fixed vector such that probability over all x f of x equal to g of x greater than 1 minus delta. Okay. So just to, I mean, somewhat, I don't know how useful it is, but just to pictorially understand this. The point is that we are asking that if our function looks something like this. So, so our function values are these yellow points, and maybe I shouldn't write like that. Yeah, so the function values are those yellow points, whatever it means for 0, 1 to the end. So you want to see if there is some fixed interpolating linear function which actually interpolates most points. Okay, so that's the question. And also one important part of this definition is that this condition can be tested statistically. So it's somewhat more, so it's kind of useful to ask whether this first condition implies the second condition. Okay, so by just sampling, you sample some x comma y from the population and ask whether this holds. Okay, so now the question is, okay, so now let me say one fact. So firstly, is it true that if f is delta close to a linear function, then is f, I mean, to a good degree approximately linear? And that is of course true if if this f of x equal to g of x for a large proportion, then even for a large proportion of inputs x comma y, this f of x plus y equal to f of x plus f of y. So let me just say that. So fact, so f is delta close to linear implies 3 delta approximately linear. So as long as x comma x y comma x plus y all belong to the region where f of x equal to g of x, definitely f of x plus y equal to f of x plus f of y, because there f just equals to g, and that condition holds with probability at least 1 minus 3 delta, right? Because you're demanding x to be in that region, y to be in that region, and x plus y to be in that region. Okay, so this is clear. So if anyone has any questions about this, just ask. Okay, so now what the question is f is epsilon approximately linear. Does this imply? So also just one point, that this constant I'm not worrying too much about. So I'm just going to say that basically I'm saying if f is close to linear, then f is close to approximately linear. So here my next question is, if f is epsilon approximately linear, then is f some, I don't know what, f is something close to linear. Is this true? Given that f is epsilon approximately linear, how good can we interpolate the points? That's the question. How well can we interpolate the points? Okay. So now where does Fourier analysis come in? Let me just, okay. So now I want to just change my notation of this linear function. My linear functions were from f from 0, 1 to the end to 0, 1. So let me just change notation. Change of notation, because I want to actually identify 0, 1 to plus 1 minus 1, the multiplicative group, which is also isomorphic to Z2. But it's useful because our characters take values in S1. So this is actually a good, it's a good change of notation. So let phi, okay, so this is the, I mean, the whatever, the trivial isomorphism between 0, 1 to the end to plus 1 minus 1, where you just take an element and I mean, you can say it like this: take the element and take the power, take -1 to the power that. So if you take 0, you'll get 1, and if you take 1, you get -1. So this is an isomorphism. Okay, and now I want to convert all my things about functions from 0, 1 to the n to 0, 1 to questions about after composing with 5. Okay, so this will be convenient. That's why I'm doing it. So this function, under this change of notation, I wanted to go to f tilde equal to phi composed f. So my function f 0, 1 to the n to 0, 1. And then we can also identify 0, 1 to +1, -1 via phi. So basically, we might as well consider a function from 0, 1 to the n to +1, -1. Right. Okay, but now what happens to the linearity condition? That just maps to the condition. Basically, when we recast it in terms of f tilde, we get that f of x plus y is equal to f of x times f of y. Basically, it's a group homomorphism from the, sorry, here the 0, 1 to the n. So 0, 1 to the n took the multiplicative group +1, -1, because we're just phi is just an isomorphism. So this is clear.
I think you
Okay.
mean tilde there, f tilde times.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So this is the new condition. And now what happens to linear functions? So we know all linear functions are of this form. That goes to x maps to what? So since this is given explicitly by -1 to the power dot, I mean the input. Okay, here now why did I write that? So this is from 0, 1 to the 0, 1 to +1, -1. So x goes to -1 to the power alpha dot x. So all functions which satisfy f tilde x plus y equals f tilde x plus f times f tilde y are basically x maps to -1 to the alpha dot x. Okay. But now what is this condition f tilde x plus y equals f tilde x times f tilde y? That is just the condition for being a homomorphism to S1, right? Because +1 and -1 belong to S1. So basically what we're getting is that linear functions have been recast to characters. Okay, so this is the change of notation that is convenient. Okay, so now next let me move. Now you may have guessed what are the characters of the 2 to the n characters of 0, 1 to the n. There are 2 to the n because the theorem says that they form an orthonormal basis to a vector space of dimension 2 to the n. So it is, so let me just write the claim. The characters 0, 1 to the n are given by what? Just x maps to, so they're just basically arising out of linear functions from this change of notation. So basically they are x dot alpha, where alpha belongs to 0, 1 to the n. Okay, so that's the first point I want to make in this claim. And the second point I want to make is that so what does this inner product look like? So just about the point 1, we have basically found all characters of 0, 1 to the n. Okay, and the reason is we know there are 2 to the n characters from the theorem, and we found 2 to the n distinct characters. So these must be all of them. And these are our natural orthonormal basis for the space of all functions on 0, 1 to the n. Okay, so if fg, so let me just now describe the inner product in a different way. Okay, so here I can write R or C or whatever, but let me just write +1 -1 for now. Okay, that's what we're going to be interested in. Okay, so then fg is what? that is equal to what? So this is my claim. I'll just prove it in a second. But it is just expectation x over x of f of x times g of x. Because expectation x f of x g of x is just 1 over 2 to the n summation x belongs to 0 1 to the n f of x times g of x, which is precisely so yeah, but let me just write the proof of this. So one is just that these are all homomorphisms. And we have found two to the n distinct homomorphisms. Okay, and so it follows from the theorem that these are all. Okay, and now about the second point, well, this is very easy. So f comma g is equal to, by definition, so let's just go back to just make sure what we have is correct. So I'm talking about this thing. Okay, so just using this inner product, what we are getting is 1 over 2 to the n, 1 over mod g of summation x belongs to 0, 1 to the n of f of x times g of x. G of x bar is just g of x because we are taking only plus 1 minus 1. Okay, so this is just equal to expectation over some uniformly chosen x belongs to, so I'll just write it like this. I won't write, it's understood. F of x times g. So this proves the claim. So let me just summarize what we have. So first we considered linear functions 0, 1 to the n to 0, 1. We showed that all of them are of the form x goes to alpha dot x. Okay, that was clear. But then we defined this epsilon approximately linear functions, which means the condition holds with probability one, at least 1 minus epsilon. And that was checkable statistically. Okay, because you can just take a few random inputs to figure out what this probability is approximately. And f is delta close to linear if there is a single g, linear g, that interpolates most points. Okay, and it was clear that if f is this condition, if there is a single function that interpolates it with high probability, then it is also this condition holds with reasonably high probability. Now we are asking the converse, and to ask the converse, to solve the converse, we just did a change of notation because we want to use the orthonormality of the characters by just identifying 0, 1 to plus 1 minus 1. And now these linear functions map to characters. So under this change of notation, we're basically asking if f tilde x plus y equal to f tilde x times f tilde y with high probability, then is it true that there is some character which agrees with f tilde with high probability? Okay, so that's our new basically statement. So let me just go on to that, the main theorem. F is, so I'm just rewriting the question as it now linear. So this implies f is epsilon close to linear. So I just want to emphasize that this epsilon approximately linear is checkable statistically, but this epsilon close to linear is an existence theorem. So it's not easy to figure that out. So that's why this is somewhat interesting. Okay. So what's the proof? So this is the main part. Okay. So let f 0 1 to the n be be epsilon. So also just note that this epsilon is the same as this epsilon. Okay. There we had the other direction, we had got 3 epsilon. That's not too important, but just a point. Linear. Okay. Let f tilde be the map after the change of notation. So phi of f, which is, so this equals 0, 1 to the n, 2 plus 1 minus 1. Okay. So now what do we know about this function phi tilde? We know that f satisfies the condition f of x plus y equals f of x plus f of y for most inputs x comma y. So what does f tilde satisfy? So we know. So what do we know? We know probability. If we uniformly choose x comma y at random from the 0, 1 to the n independently, basically 2 random inputs we plug in, we should get that this condition holds now. This multiplicative function condition. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, can we somehow write this condition in terms of expectations? So now, the point is that suppose f of x plus y does equal f tilde, I mean f tilde x plus y does equal f tilde x times f tilde y. Okay. So either both of them are -1 or both of them are +1. So if you consider the product f tilde x plus y times f tilde x times f tilde y, that is equal to +1 if and only if this condition holds, right? Because if it doesn't hold, then one of them is +1, one of them is -1. So their product will be -1. Okay, so I'll just now write a statement and just explain it after that. Therefore, I want to write it in terms of the inner product that we have. We have written the inner product as expectation over random x belongs to 0, 1 to the n of f of x times g of x, right? So I want to write it in terms of that. So f of x, so this condition I'm just rewriting x plus y. One minus what? So with probability 1 minus epsilon, this condition holds. Therefore, this value inside the bracket in the expectation is +1. And with at most epsilon probability, this expression in the brackets of this expectation is -1. Therefore, the expectation is at least 1 minus 2 epsilon, right? 1 minus epsilon, at least 1 minus epsilon probability, it's taking the value +1. And at most epsilon probability, it's taking the value -1. So therefore, the expected value is at least 1 minus epsilon minus epsilon, which is 1 minus 2 epsilon. Okay. So this is what we have now. Now the idea is just write f tilde in terms of the Fourier coefficients and just try to use orthogonality relation and see what we get. Okay. So let us write f tilde in terms of the characters. So once again, what are the characters? The characters of the form x goes to -1 to the x dot alpha, where alpha is some fixed vector. Okay, they are just the push forwards of linear functions. Okay, under change of notation. So alpha belongs to 0, 1 to the n. We can write it in terms of the basis vectors. This orthogonal basis. Where chi alpha, what is chi alpha? So chi alpha is from 0, 1 to the n. So it's a character to 0 to +1 -1, which maps x to -1 to the alpha dot x. Okay, so we've just written f tilde in terms of c alpha x alpha. And now what am I leading up to? Basically, I want to show one of the Fourier coefficients is large. Because what does a Fourier coefficient large mean? it means that this is large. Now this expression is large if, so if this expression is large, okay, so firstly f of x times g of x is equal to +1 if they agree, because if both are -1 or both are +1, and -1 if they don't agree. So if this expectation is large, then we know that f of x agrees with g of x. And this is also the inner product. So the C alphas, so here the C alphas are just inner product, sorry, of chi alpha with f tilde. So basically what we want to show is that in this expansion, most of the mass of f tilde is located at some fixed Fourier coefficient, given that this condition holds. Okay, so that's the point. So let us just write the condition. So let us just write this. One second. Let us just write. Let us just write this line. Okay, again, and plug in the Fourier expansion. So let me do it on a new page. So calculation. So we have got hold of the Fourier expansion and we want to show that one of the Fourier coefficients is large. So let's see what the condition gives. So this is the left-hand side of our condition. I'm just substituting this expansion. Summation C alpha chi alpha of y. Okay. Now so just look at this expansion for some time and try to use orthogonality relations. Okay. So this summation C alpha chi alpha x plus y, then we have summation C alpha chi alpha of x, and then we have summation C alpha chi alpha. C alpha chi alpha is the expansion of f in terms of the characters, orthonormal characters, and that we're getting by the theorem. Okay, so now what happens when we expand this out? So just consider some particular cross term and see what happens there. Okay, so let me just write it out. What is happening to a cross term? Okay, so what is happening to a cross term? Okay, so let me write it here. Expectation. So what is a cross term? So when we expand this out, we'll get some sum of some many terms, and by linearity, we can take expectation inside the sum. So expectation of the sum of these guys is the sum of the expectation. Let us see which expectations actually survive. So let us take a particular cross term, C alpha, C beta, C gamma, when we expand these brackets out and see what happens to its expectation. Okay, so this is a typical cross term. So we can take C alpha, C beta, C gamma out, they're just constants. So chi alpha x plus y, chi beta x, chi gamma of y. Okay, and so this is equal to, okay, now we know chi alpha is a character. So chi alpha of x plus y is what? Chi alpha of x times chi alpha of y. So let me just write it. So just once again, this expectation is over two uniformly at random independent inputs from 0, 1 to the end. So we write this as this, chi alpha of y, chi beta of x, Sure. Okay. Now we can isolate the x terms and the y terms. So we have this x term, and this is the y x term, and this is the y terms. And since x and y are chosen uniformly at random from the hypercube of 0, 1 to the n, we can basically split the expectation. So this is by independence of x comma y. Okay, we're choosing them uniformly at random independent. So basically we can write this. Okay, do you agree? So this is by independent. Yeah. If you don't know this fact that you can multiply the expectations if they're independent, then just assume it. And okay, so now we are in good shape because we've got hold of the inner product. So when is this non-zero? Okay, so when is this non-zero? This is actually, just note that this is just equal to the inner product of chi alpha with chi beta, okay, by the claim. And here this is the inner product, this is the this is the inner product of chi alpha with chi gamma. Okay, so this is non-zero. The first term is non-zero only if alpha is equal to beta, and the second term is non-zero only if alpha is equal to gamma. Right. So we get this is equal to 0 unless beta equal to, okay, beta equal to alpha in the first condition, first yellow part, and the second gives that alpha equal to gamma. So basically, unless all the alpha equal to beta equal to gamma, the cross term will give an expectation of 0. So we need only consider the term where alpha equal to beta equal to gamma. Okay, just once again, what did we do? We just substituted the Fourier coefficient into the condition we have, the Fourier expansion, and just used orthogonality relations. Okay. So now this expression, let me just call it star. We know that the cross terms go to 0, are 0 except when they are all the chosen from the same character. So what we get is star is equal to, okay, let me, maybe I'll just copy it just to make it clear. So this is equal to what? This is equal to, since the cross terms go away, this is just precisely expectation x comma y summation c alpha cube chi alpha x plus y. I'm just taking the same term from each bracket because that's all that survives. And this is equal to expectation x comma y summation c alpha cube, right? I'm just, oh, I forgot c alpha, right? Here, oh, okay, this is correct. There's a c alpha in front of chi alpha x, there's a c alpha in front of chi alpha y. So this is equal to this. Now, what is chi alpha of x? What is chi alpha of x plus y times chi alpha of x times chi alpha of y? Chi alpha of x plus y is chi alpha of x times chi alpha of y. So this is chi alpha of x whole squared times chi alpha of y whole squared. Okay, just by the property of homomorphism. But that is always 1 because these are maps to plus 1 minus 1. So that is just 1. So basically we just get this. And this is just constant. So this is just summation c alpha cube. Okay. So we've got the sum of the Fourier coefficients cube is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. So where is that? So we had got, look at the second yellow thing, this thing. That condition we had written as expectation of the product is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. And now we are got that this left hand side is just sum of the Fourier coefficients Q. Okay. So now what is, so from earlier, we have that summation C alpha cube is greater than 1 minus 2 epsilon. So that implies summation, I'm just rewriting it. Now, what do we know about C alpha squares? Okay, so let me just make this point that again we'll be using orthogonality. So f tilde is a function from 0, 1 to the n to plus 1 minus 1. So what is inner product of f tilde with itself? That is just equal to 1 over 2 to the n, or I can write in terms of expectations. So let me write expectation over x, f tilde of x times f tilde of x. But since this is plus 1 minus 1, this is always 1. So this is just 1. F tilde of x times f tilde of x is always 1. So this actually f tilde has norm 1. So length 1. Okay, within this inner product space. So therefore, if you compute its length with respect to any orthonormal basis, it will also have length 1. So therefore, summation C alpha squares is also equal to 1. So just, I mean, we may compute, yeah, okay. So this is, I suppose this is clear, because if you have an orthonormal basis and we take the coefficients and take sum of squares, that is just the length of f. Okay. So maybe just to be completely clear, I don't know if first years actually have learned inner product spaces yet. So let me just make this clear. So this is summation C alpha chi alpha times summation C alpha chi alpha. And now when you expand this out by bilinearity, the only term that will survive is summation C alpha chi alpha dot, I mean inner product of chi alpha comma chi alpha. But that is just 1 because their chi alphas are orthonormal, which means they have length 1. The cross terms go away by orthogonality. So therefore you get summation C alpha squared is equal to 1. Okay. So that makes it clear. Now, so C alpha squares are basically just weights that add up to 1. So this equation, so we get that max C alpha is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. The weighted average of the C alphas by the weight C alpha squares is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. So therefore C alpha, one of the C alphas is also greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. So let me just call it C mu. C mu is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. Okay, so for some mu is there such that C mu is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. So we have that one of the Fourier coefficients is large. And now we are basically done because that's what we wanted. Okay, so let's see mu. Let me just tell you how this completes the proof of the theorem. So this implies that expectation over x chi mu of x is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon. So what does this mean? That means, so when is this f of f tilde x times chi mu of x 1? It is 1 when they agree and it is minus 1 when they disagree. And this is greater than equal to 1 minus 2 epsilon, right? So therefore they must agree on at least 1 minus epsilon of the points. Otherwise you will get an expectation which is less than 1 minus 2 epsilon. So this implies that probability x f tilde x the expectation of the product is large. The product is equal to, gives a value of 1. So in the if they are equal and minus 1 if they are not equal. So therefore the probability also has to be large of them being equal if the expectation is large. And then if we go back from the change of notation, basically we're saying that probability x that the original function f from 0, 1 to the n to 0, 1 equals mu dot x, the linear function mu dot x, with great probability greater than 1 minus epsilon. So therefore, f is epsilon close to the linear function g. G equal to mu dot x. Okay. So basically we started from the condition that f of x plus y equal to f of x plus f of y for most inputs, and we have shown that f is epsilon close to a linear function g, which is what we wanted to show. So this completes the proof, and what we basically had to show, it boiled down to showing that f tilde had a large Fourier coefficient. I mean, had its Fourier coefficients concentrated on one character. Okay, so now so this is the application, and I also had planned to give you the proof of orthogonality relations, but I think that will take like 20 minutes. I don't know if people must be tired. And that's standard also. So you can look at this book, Stein, Shakachi, he has a book on Fourier analysis, and there's one book on there's a chapter on finite Fourier analysis, which gives everything. Or in the previous talk on representation theory, probably proved orthogonality relations. So I'll stop here. So if anyone has any questions, they can ask. So I hope this was understandable to first years also and second years.
If anyone has any questions, you can just unmute. I don't think there are any questions. So yeah, thank you, Ritvik, for the talk.
Yeah, thanks.
So we'll probably meet next weekend, and some senior will give a talk, most probably. We will inform the details by mail somewhere midweek. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining. I'll stop recording now.
Yeah, thanks.